Welcome back to the Homefront podcast. I am your host, Blair Hicks, and we are talking about something really hot today. We're going to be talking about the different types of education and schooling, homeschooling, private school, public school, and we're so excited about it that we don't even know what to do with our hands. Jeff was saying, I don't know what to do with my hands suddenly. I'm like, right?
I really don't know.
Right? Now I pointed it out. And I mean, if you have seen any of our other Homefront podcast episodes, you know Kirk very well. So welcome back, Kirk.
Hello,
to
Blair.
you,
Good to see
Pastor
you.
Kirk. People, you're practically famous now. I don't know if you know that. I just practically famous.
Okay.
And
What does it take to move beyond practically?
that's another podcast.
Okay.
So on top of having Kirk here, we also have a dream team. May I just say that? That's why we're so excited, is because this is practically the dream team here. We're old news. We want to dive into who you all are. So why don't we start over here with Jeff? Tell us who you are and what perspective you're bringing, but also the obvious thing here is we are all parents. So tell us how many kids you have. Tell us your perspective that you're bringing, and of course, tell us your name.
Name is Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
I have 3 kids, 3 boys, and my personal schooling experience growing up was public school until I actually went to a Christian university and then a public university for teachers college after that. And then my kids are in Christian school at this point, but I currently teach high school in the local public board.
So multiple perspectives that you are bringing today. Mm-hmm. Laura, fill us in.
My name is Laura. I have 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl, and I homeschool them. I used to teach in the Christian system, and I grew up going to Christian elementary school and then public high school.
I love it. Even more perspective. I don't want to say your name. I'm ruining out the surprise for everybody. But this is also really exciting, Amanda, because we've talked about podcasting, like how cool it would be to be on a podcast together. For so long. And now here we are. So tell us your name.
I'm Amanda and mom of 3. I've got a girl and 2 boys. My kids have gone through the public education system. I am a teacher in the public education system, both at middle schools and elementary schools. Mm-hmm. And so bringing the perspective of a parent and also of a teacher.
And you've been in the public school system for a while.
Yes, 22 years.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yep.
And also a celebrity. This is Pastor Derek's wife, who has been on previous Homefront episodes. Have we had Andrew on yet? We got to get Andrew on. Laura, you are Pastor Andrew's wife. Right, yeah. So this is really exciting. Kirk, what about you? I know that you are here to make sure
I'm
that
confused.
we're not speaking heresy.
I come from like all kinds of different backgrounds. So we got 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl. As well. And all of our kids, we just graduated our final kid from university a couple of weeks ago, which was awesome. So we're through that stage of our life. But for me growing up, I grew up going to Christian school, also did some homeschooling for a little while. Way back in the day, we had grade 13 and I had to do grade 13 in public school.
That wasn't that long ago, can I say? It wasn't way back.
That wasn't way back.
Thanks,
She's
Laura.
trying to help you.
I
Grade
appreciate
13,
that.
So.
And then our kids all grew up going to public school.
Amazing. So more perspective. I am a public school through and through. I went to public school. My kids are in public school. Again, I have 2 kids, 2 girls. We are fresh in the public school. They are quite young. So not as much perspective there, but I have the perspective of the current and recent climate of making the decision and what decision is best and when, and that changing, it is a changing climate. So this is really good. So one thing we did before the podcast was we sort of like set a goal, and what this podcast, so we can bring the listeners into that, what this podcast is hopefully going to do is going to help bring some different perspectives and kind of guide parents who are wondering about more information, guide them towards wise decisions and pull them away from unwise decisions. This is not a debate. If you are looking for that material, you'll have to go elsewhere. But we really just want to educate and speak knowledge and truth into this wild topic, because it is wild might not be the best adjective, but it's a heavy one. And many of you have already said that you've had this conversation multiple times with multiple people.
Yep.
So it's clear that it is a big one. So for the purpose of this podcast, we are talking about education system. I was going to ask us to define what education is to you, but I feel like we're talking about the education systems. I feel like that's a bit of a definition enough. So I'd love to dive right in to ask you to briefly share about, so you've already told us where your kids all go and your ages. So what led you to start seriously thinking about the education options for your kids? And, if you wrestled with your decision, and was this always your plan, or did something shift along the way? I'm just throwing that out there to get us started. Don't
everybody talk at once.
Yeah. It's usually the common situation. I'll start. I'll start. You know what? Steve and I really did wrestle. So Steve went to Catholic school, and that's not private school. It's not public school, sort of, right? It's a weird in between. And he was like kind of for it. We literally decided on public school after wrestling and discussing because we thought we need to start somewhere. And we thought, we're going to pray about it. We're going to trust the Lord on this. And we're just going to start somewhere and start making decisions after that. And so nothing was set in stone. We still have that perspective of we are ready for change if there needs to be change. But and maybe that was unwise. One of you could speak to that if you think that was an unwise decision.
I think my starting point, growing up in a small town, even smaller villages, there wasn't really, I didn't know anybody who homeschooled or who did private school. Private school wasn't an option, not where I was coming from.
Interesting.
And so with me growing up in the public school system meant that I was exposed to, it wasn't as multicultural in the area that I was in as it is now. So it was basically like you're either coming from a Christian family or you're not coming from a Christian family. And there were far more people not from a Christian family in the community that I was growing up in. But that was part of what kind of brushed up against my life and made me consider, is Christianity real? Is this something that I want to follow? What does this mean for my life? And if with friendships and with relationships that built, it challenged my thinking, but that almost made it so that when I became a parent, my kind of default, I guess my first struggle was, am I going to teach in the public system or in a private system? As a Christian, which environment am I going to go into? And I did wrestle with that, but it did come down to, I really felt like God was calling me back into the public system. And for me personally, as somebody who's already professing faith, it meant being salt and light within that environment, and standing out, making a difference for the sake of Christ so I can point people to Christ and bring that hope. And I said, I don't know that there will always be a place for me within the public system with changes and shifts that goes on, but as long as God provides the opportunity for me to be there, I think it's really important that I am there. And then naturally, as my kids came through, as a teacher, seeing the perspective of kids that are in my class and the impact that one of the first schools that I worked in, some of my strongest, just most well-rounded, nicest kids were consistently both practicing Christians or practicing Muslims. And I was like, man, that actually kind of makes me proud as a parent or as a teacher, as a Christian, to say, okay, when you're living your faith out, when the fruit of the Spirit is coming through, it makes a difference in the classroom environment. It makes a difference to the teachers as well. And it provided an opportunity for them to have some of their beliefs really challenged and them to begin to develop their filters. So I saw that as a positive. And we started our kids into public education with the caveat that if they ever hit a hostile environment where their faith is being berated, where their character is being torn down, where it's not the best learning environment for them, for their faith, we're with each kid, we were going to have to make that decision as to if public education is still the best opportunity. And going through and making the shift to high school, we had to continually just kind of hold that up to God. God, do you have us here still, or are you calling us to something else? And there were definitely times where our kids like, man, it'd be so much easier if we just went to Christian school.
Right, yeah.
Or when they're trying to pray in kindergarten, the teacher's like, no, that's a private thing. And they're like, wouldn't it be great if there was a school where we could just like pray to Jesus? And I was like, well, yeah, that kind of does exist, but that's not the choice we feel like God's calling our family to make.
So you would say that you kind of took it year by year,
Yes.
teacher by teacher, school by school.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that. Anything to add from this side?
We've always, first of all, I didn't plan on homeschooling. I went to school for teachers college. I had no experience with homeschooling. And our oldest was very bright and reading like at a grade 5 level, and we were going to send him into kindergarten. And as someone who's taught in a kindergarten class, I was like, he's going to drive the teacher crazy and he's not going to learn, right?
He'll be bored. Sure.
So I was like, oh, we'll just keep him home for kindergarten because it's kindergarten, right? I can teach kindergarten. And from that point on, it's been year by year, kid by kid. Just exactly like Amanda was saying, just reevaluating every year. Is this the best? And like, no way I thought I would still be homeschooling now.
Really?
Like we have our oldest is in grade 11. He does online schooling, but didn't expect to be doing it this long, but just seeking the Lord every year and sort of seeing how it has worked for each kid and for our family. And so that's sort of where we find ourselves.
I love that. And I don't know if you want to jump in, Jeff, or if we want to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you restate the question?
Yeah, absolutely. I can. I was just wondering what led you to start seriously considering about your education, because you're a teacher in the public school board, but your kids go to Christian school. So so why are you teaching the public school board, but why are your kids going to Christian school? And like, sort of, did you wrestle with it? Was it always your plan? Like, did you have to change?
Yeah, wrestled with both for sure. And I think what I came around to was the salt and light element as well. That being what I grew up in as a student was what I feel comfortable with as well in terms of the environment and just what I had always pictured. It was also what my wife and I had always kind of by default imagined we would do in terms of what our kids would do for schooling is public, because that's what we did. What I found by the time I was getting around to, our oldest heading for school, and my experience with public school was that there was a great difference between public school as I remembered it as a student and the way it was at that time in a few key ways. Some of which I think public school boards ours in particular is working to remedy. For example, like reading was something that was really a struggle for some of our elementary students in recent history in this area, but they're coming around to getting better at that, so that's good. But that was something that was an academic element that led us to consider our local Christian school. We had also come from a church back home for us where it seemed like the cultural expectation was a little bit more towards Christian schools, and there was an element in us of just wanting to be different, not wanting to do that. And so we had to wrestle with that as well. And I think in talking with a lot of wise people around us, including Laura and her family and some others who had done different things, had really moved towards that kid by kid, year by year mentality. And so it's it's something that we revisit, or probably have revisited every year since then. But we've remained at the Christian school, and it's been a really good experience for us.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
I'd love, this is a question that I'm really excited to ask because I want to hear from you, all of your perspectives. What do you believe are some common misconceptions about your chosen educational path that you wish people understood? Because I'm totally putting my neck on the line out here and saying, I know that there are stereotypes and I'm afraid I might believe some of them. So please educate me.
You should tell us the stereotype.
No, I'm not going to do that. We will lose listeners. I don't know. Maybe they're not stereotypes. Maybe they're correct. I don't know. So I'd love, what do you think is something that that your education choice for your kids or where you're working, even that, is a common misconception that you'd love to correct?
You go.
Yeah, sure. I think with Christian school, because it is private, there are definitely people who think of it as private school in the larger sense of private education, and by extension being associated with families who have a lot more wealth. Oh yeah, we'd send our kids to Christian school if we could, but and it's a real thing. It does cost money, but there are a lot of families who sacrifice a lot of other things that other families can say yes to send their kids there. So that's just kind of one thing I think a little bit about Christian school. Yeah.
I actually get that one a lot too. Oh, it's so nice you can do that. We could never do that.
Yeah.
I'm like,
And the amount of things that you've left
right.
so that you can do that.
Yeah.
Right, like sacrifice-wise.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So like a common misconception for homeschooling would be that you're just good at that. Or like you're a teacher, you went to
Right.
teacher's college, so you can do that.
Definitely. I definitely
Okay.
have people say that. And
Yeah.
I don't think that's true.
No.
At all, actually, because I think people know their kid really well. And sometimes that makes homeschooling really hard because you butt heads. And but I think parents generally know their kid the best. And so I think that's a benefit. But
Interesting.
I would say one of the biggest stereotypes about homeschoolers is how socially awkward they are. And I asked my husband if I could say this because he was like, I'm not, like, no, our kids are not going to be, we're not homeschooling. Like, I don't want kids like that. Because he had, like, we all know the homeschoolers who are awkward.
You want to name some names right now?
I don't mean we all know the same ones. Right. We've all run into them. Thanks. But I lost my train
No,
of
sorry,
thought.
Laura.
That Andrew didn't want to necessarily homeschool and
Yes.
social elements.
But having been, I mean, we're all teachers. We all have taught socially awkward kids. And so that would be my pushback
Right.
is there are just, there are socially awkward humans around. There are people who interact better with adults than other people. And so I would say that's very not true. And actually, I think a gift of homeschooling is how kids get to interact with various ages and with adults in a different way than if you're, in a grade 5 classroom with all of the grade 5s.
Right.
And I can watch that happen at co-ops or sports things where I see like, a bunch of teenage boys going and helping a kid get their lunch or whatever. Like there's just a lot of interaction across age groups, and I love that. That's it.
So a common misconception of homeschool might be that they're not socialized, but your argument is not only are they socialized, they're socialized with different ages and groups and more than maybe what you might have in the classroom.
Yeah. It's not an argument because we're not arguing.
Not argument.
But yes, that would be my point.
Thank you for correcting me.
Can I flip this question on the other side of
Okay.
that same coin? Because I also wonder, like a lot of parents kind of sometimes have their own already preconceived idea of this is where I would lean towards. This is I would lean public or homeschool or Christian school or private school. And I'm wondering whether or not there are potential blind spots that those parents may have already, where they're like, I'm sold out on public school is the way, or homeschool is the way, or Christian school is the way, because, and they've got this blank, and you look at them and you go, yeah, you might be right on that, but you might be missing these other blind spots along the way. So one of the reasons why we put our kids into public school was growing up in Christian school, I lived inside the Christian bubble, which was great, very safe. But one of the preconceived ideas in a Christian school was there's no bad kids there. Like the kids aren't going to get in trouble.
Okay.
Like, because they're going to be surrounded by Jesus people all the time. And so the kids are never going to make any bad decisions. And I knew parents who lived in this mindset of, like, you never have to worry about your children ever making a bad choice because they're inside the Christian school environment. And then their kids, most of the kids I went to school with were still getting drunk. They still had drugs. They still were doing things that could happen in any other environment. And I watched so many parents go, wait, this is rattling my world because I thought my kids were going to be safe from that stuff.
Right.
Right. So, yeah, I'm just curious, as you think about your own environments where you've got your kids, where have you seen maybe some blind spots that parents might have where they go, I'm sold out on this?
I'll jump into that one. One thing that I've heard a lot from a teaching perspective is that the academic standards or that the teaching is higher when you get into a private school environment. The thing that I would push back on in terms of that thinking is if you gave me a classroom full of kids with fully engaged families, I could get those same academic results. The issues that we run into in the public school system that a lot of times they're not dealing with in a private school system, even if class sizes and everything else is equal, we have higher rates of newcomers to Canada, some of them never having been in school systems ever before. And then you add on top of that we've got multilingual learners where English isn't the first language, where maybe the parents are really encouraging schooling to happen, but they didn't have access to education in their home country. And so they don't know how to support, or they don't know how to support in English. And so you put all of these factors together. And when I hear people say, well, it's higher academic standard, well, actually, by withdrawing your kids from the public system, you're actually withdrawing some of that balance, and you're bringing the level of the public education classroom. You're taking the balance away from the classroom. You're taking away engaged and supportive parents who are willing to come in and volunteer and help with that reading program, who are willing to come in and help on the school council to raise money for the school. And then you're adding in students that are coming from trauma, that are coming from multilingual environments, that are coming with all these additional challenges. And the classes end up so heavily weighted with additional needs, where we need individualized learning plans and behavior plans and supports. And it's not that the quality of the education that they're being offered is less, but it's that the needs are so much greater in that classroom.
Yeah. I would love to take this podcast toward, like, there's so many places we could take it. Like, we could talk about like the impact of the different boards, like the Christian school board or the homeschooling community and the public school board, and its impact on the community around us, and financial pieces and all that. And I want to go down that way, but I feel like Kirk's not going to let me. So, we'll stay in the zone of like our kids. And one thing with the public school board, or one thing with having your kids in public school that I feel like I could speak towards about the misconception, kind of adding a little bit to yours, would be like, hearing the worst of the worst, which would be, television news, social media, or someone's really bad experience and it's their cousin and brother once removed. And, I don't know if you can have once removed brothers, but you know what I mean? It's Joe Blow. And you're suddenly like, that sounds awful. And I know for me, we started somewhere, and I expected that because of what I had read and heard. So I was like, I had described it as like my finger was on the trigger. I needed to hear one thing, and I was pulling that trigger, and it never happened. And I realized it was so based on the community, the teacher, the school, the principal. Like, there were so many factors than just the fact that it was public school. And so that was eye-opening. I to be honest, I would have thought we'd be pulled out by now because of what I went into it with, the perspective that I had. So that, I don't know if you would agree with that misconception being in
Yeah, and I think in the day of social media, again, that one story is shared so many times.
Yeah.
If I keep retelling the same bad story, like if I have a bad experience with you, and then I'm retelling it to Lori, and then I'm retelling it to Jeff, and then I'm retelling it to Kirk,
right.
I'm now reliving that over and over again. But now on social media, it's then like an exponential impact because that same story is shared so many times, and it kind of does blow issues up. Now, there are legitimate things to be concerned with.
You don't want to stick your head.
You want to be aware.
Yes.
But again, people sometimes are making a decision based on fear. And that's, I love that each of the answers that we're giving here for reasons where, we're holding it loosely and we're constantly reevaluating what's best for our child. what is God calling us to as a family? Because God doesn't always call us to what's easy. It's not easy for any of us to make the decision. There's different types of sacrifices that are made, whichever decision you make. But one idea that I would bounce off of, like the flip side of what Jeff had said, yeah, some families really are sacrificing a lot. Well, and Laura mentioned it too, like to homeschool. Yeah. There's sacrifices there, but my kids have also told me that they've had kids from private school environments be like, why are you in the public education system again? Oh, right, because your parents are poor. And so there's this attitude, attitudes come from somewhere.
Sure.
So whether it's coming from their parent or whether it's coming from other kids, but this idea that if you could do better, you would do better. And that's obviously private school. Right. That attitude has come out more, not something I've heard, but something my kids have heard. And so that's been an interesting thing, again, to be on guard against. Whatever decision that we make, if we're transparent with our kids about here's the decision that we're making, so that we can honor God, so that we can do what's best for you. But every family is going to have to make those decisions for their family and for their specific kids. If that's the dialogue, rather than, well, we have the resources and you don't, or we make the sacrifices. And I know you're not saying that at all, but that obviously comes through sometimes. Sure. And that's something to be on guard against.
And so in regards to like Christian school, and I'm not like, I would love for you, Kirk, and Jeff to speak to this. But one thing I've heard, and maybe it's a misconception, so correct me, but it can be tempting. So I'm just going to say what it is, that it's tempting to put your kids in Christian school and then just relax and take your hands off. But I think it's clear what we're hearing is that homeschooling, you have to have your hands on. Public school, you have to have your hands and ears on. Do you say that Christian school is the same? Like you can't just be like, okay, Christian school, Christian bubble. All right. Let me know if you need help with your homework. Like what would you say to that?
I think you can be a laissez-faire parent no matter what educational option you choose, right? You can, I think that's what I'm sensing is you can choose any educational option as an intentional parent or as a passive parent.
Right.
There might be ways in which we imagine if you're for the thoughtful Christian, you might approach public school or homeschool a little bit more engaged. But I think the thoughtful Christian, the same person who's using the same process, which I would recommend is viewing your educational choice as part of a discipleship plan for your family, you would also approach Christian school similarly.
Ooh, that's well articulated. I like how you said that.
I think, I think I had friends growing up or people who I knew who it seemed like in their family, Christian school was the whole discipleship model.
Interesting.
I don't think that's the best that we can do.
Yeah.
I also want to avoid talking about it based on outcomes or a very pragmatic way, because there'll be some people who say, why would I put my kids in Christian school? My brother went all through Christian school and he's not a Christian now. I'm like, okay, sure. But we know as parents that our discipleship plan is about setting our kids up for success, knowing that they will have agency of their own. So we can't evaluate every educational option based on their outcomes in terms of their spiritual decisions. Right. In particular, the ones that are right after they graduate, who knows what fruit has been sown and is yet to bear itself out years beyond graduation. So there's that as well. But I've seen that. I have seen that. Christian school is the plan.
Right.
But I think if we're evaluating this fairly and imagining a thoughtful Christian parent, any option they choose, they will approach thoughtfully, and it will be part of an integrated discipleship plan for the home.
Yeah, I think that's a super important point, because as parents, you got to understand you've got X number of years with your kids living under your roof, hopefully, and so in that period of time, everything you do is discipling them for the day when they're not under your roof. Everything you do. So it's not just about what education am I sending them to. That's part of it. It's church life. It's how we spend money as a family, how we spend our time together as a family. What are the things that we are investing in together? Like all of those things are all part of shaping the life of a child. And as a parent, you have to think intentionally. You're actually biblically required to think intentionally around all of those aspects of investing in the life of your child to prepare them for who God wants them to be ultimately, right? And you don't control the outcomes, right? But you have the responsibility to surround them with the right resources and supports that are going to invest in their life from yourself and other partners in your life to help prepare those kids to be everything God wants them to be.
And interesting enough, when we lived in Oakville and when we lived in Brampton, and in greater multicultural communities where they felt like there wasn't enough moral teaching within the public education system, there were a lot of non-Christian families sending their kids to Christian schools because they wanted moral education and a worldview that they thought was a generally good worldview to be integrated into their child's education. And as I moved to the Waterloo Region School Board, it was right at the time that they were starting to realize if we're going to teach the whole child, you can't actually separate the worldview from who they are. And there was a question that I was asked in my interview about teaching the whole child. And I said, well, here's what I've done in Peel. And I know that it would look different in this board because you don't talk about religion at all. And the principal stopped me and they said, actually, what you're doing is right. And we're in the process of shifting. You need to keep doing what you're doing. And especially as the multiculturalism has increased around here, they're trying to integrate that. But I don't know that teachers in the public education system necessarily have the tools or training to do that well. But they are trying to shift that a bit, but for that reason, you will have families that are completely of other worldviews and other belief systems that are like, nope, this is a good education. And when we look at the academic results, it's good. And when we think about the environment we want our kids in, again, like a higher instance of that when we were in Brampton and Oakville. But it was very interesting. So again, not assuming that we're putting them in a Christian bubble. That bubble might not be Christian at all, but the teaching that's going into them from the teachers, from the curriculum, ends up reflecting that.
And I would just add, think holistically as a parent around this, because each system, I think, has some real great strengths that help in the discipleship of kids. And each system has some weaknesses and deficiencies that are there when it comes to the discipleship of kids. And so what you have to think through is, well, what are the strengths of this system? What are the weaknesses of this system when it comes to shaping our kids? And so on the weakness side, how am I going to offset those weaknesses? Where am I going to create some other environments that will more fully form my children?
There's so much wisdom there because I feel like we've just basically said, if AI was going to summarize this, I'm going to be AI right now.
Blair's starting her own AIs.
Yeah. It's that if you're looking for a hands-off option, it doesn't exist. So let's just make that clear, right? Like, and I also think it's something to encourage listeners to like sort of search your thought process on that. Like really search it and be like, am I looking for a hands-off option here? Like, am I looking for something that's just gonna, lighten my load, and really question that because the unwise decision would be to be hands-off no matter what you are picking. And you guys have been so good at articulating. And you're clearly teachers. Oh my goodness. I'm in a room full of teachers. What am I doing here? How did I get here? Anyway, this is awesome. I would love, there's so many more questions I want to ask. Okay. So as we've been talking, we've kind of been hearing a little bit about some challenges in your chosen education path. You mentioned butting heads, Laura. You had brought up a couple, Amanda. Throw in a few more in there as we chat, but I would love to know what you admire about the other education paths represented here. And that's just throwing it out there. Are you guys going to make me?
Which question are we doing first? You said more challenges, and then
Well, I want you to stir the challenges into it. Like as you're, so what you would, maybe you can, because I feel like it's
I
going
think
to
it was
come
a
up.
roundabout way to get to what do you admire about the other.
It was.
Was it? Yeah.
It was because they've been coming up anyways. The challenges are
Yeah.
revealing themselves as we talk. So that's why I didn't want to focus on that because we only have so much time, Laura. So I'd love to know what you admire about the other educational choices.
Yeah, I would echo what has been said about being intentional about making the decision and discipling your kids. And I have seen that done really well, both by parents who send their kids to the public system and by people involved in the Christian school system. I think, like Kirk was saying, you need to fill in the gaps for whatever schooling system you're a part of, right? So I think probably in the public school system, correct me if I'm wrong, but like there are a lot of conversations you're going to need to make space for conversations after school, and not that you never do that again. You're obviously going to do that in the Christian system, but that might be a spot where you are going to have to be more intentional. What are the things they're teaching you at school, or what are some of the things you're hearing in the cafeteria? Like just really open communication. And I've seen that just done so beautifully and has created like such good relationships for parents and kids. And then in the Christian system, I know some people who just, because again, you don't want to get in that bubble, you're more intentional about getting out, getting involved in like sports that are in your community and being present in your neighborhood and just finding the places that God is calling you to shine the light. And I'd say that's true for homeschooling and for the Christian system. But yeah, there are people I admire so much involved in all of the school systems.
Yeah. I love that. I love hearing that.
Teaching kids in Kidstown, especially in that grade 4, 5, 6 age group. So they've got a certain amount of training under them. There is a couple kids in particular who've come out of the Christian school system, and you can tell like their knowledge of scripture because they dive into it at home. They dive into it on Sundays. They dive into it. And I've seen this in homeschools too, again, where you're intentionally building your faith in, but there's more opportunity to actually just dive into and analyze and explore scripture and themes in scripture, different genres. And so when we're talking about, okay, so this is happening like before Jesus was born, is that Old Testament or New Testament? And like, they're like, oh, it's this, or we're looking at a certain period of history, and they can help to identify things that take a lot more intentionality and training on the point of the parent. And I know we try to do it within our children's programming here too, is building that biblical literacy. But a couple of the kids, when I say to the parent, like, hey, your kid gave this response today and they were able to make this connection, they're like, yep, it's Christian school. I'm like, well, it's also very engaged parents who are building into their child. But to know that there's another voice there reiterating and saying those same things, that is definitely something that along the way, there are moments where I'm like, like I wish that we could have that. But again, there's always going to be some sacrifices with each pathway and what you're doing. And it's meant a lot more intentionality on our part to fill in some of those gaps.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the thing for me that I really admire about the homeschool side of it, usually it's a mom who's doing the homeschooling. Not always, but most of the time it's mom. And just the profound influence and impact that has of a mom taking that time and putting that kind of energy into the life of her children is, I think, very powerful. I think it creates such a great bond in the family. And I think that it is such a gift to kids when their mom is that invested in mentoring and pouring into their life. And I just think there's just something unique and powerful about that. In a world that always relies on the external experts to do everything, not just in education, but we live in a world where there's an expert for whatever your issue is. There's just something beautifully powerful about mom being the one to pour into the life of kids. I really admire that.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
One other powerful thing, and I guess this isn't about the other, but this is within the public education system. Like, I know I'm limited what I can say as a teacher because of my role as an influence. But to sit and watch when a child who's going off to, actually it was Easter one year where kids were talking about celebrating Jesus dying and coming back to life. And one of the Muslim children were like, yeah, but that didn't happen. Like what really happened was this. And then a Christian child is like, no, this is actually like what we believe. And I was able to jump in at that point and say, actually, that is one of the differences between the two worldviews. Muslims believe this, Christians believe this. And I could help to fill in the gaps, but I'm not going to be the one initially jumping into that conversation. It's the child jumping into that conversation. And so to hear my own kids, to hear other kids that I'm teaching engage their peers and jump in or come home with questions about what other people actually believe and things that they've heard. And again, developing those filters and building those filters. But one thing that my kids have said is, you know what? We love that we're in a school that's right in our neighborhood, that the people that we go to school with are right around us. And yes, they're very different than us. And my daughter, who's now 19, has even said, like, I know we had to have some conversations way earlier than kids who went to private school had to have them. She's like, but for me, I needed that. And again, that's part of holding it up to God. Like, God, what's best for this kid? And she personally is like, she's like, I think if I didn't have that filter built in along the way, if I felt like you were keeping something from me, that actually might have been detrimental to me. And I was like, well, maybe that's part of God's plan for why you were where you were in the moment. But yes, that was having Christian kids in the environment. They can speak and challenge friends and have conversations that, again, as a Christian teacher, I can't have in those environments. And I think that part is really amazing to see, and amazing to see the way that my kids have responded to the way that those conversations have developed with friends that they know on a personal level and people that they care about on a heart level.
So they learned how to engage with all kinds of friends or peers of all sorts of, maybe even would you say even maybe like some aggression towards Christians, like how to?
Well, I mean, kids, I don't know that it's not usually aggressive the way that it comes out. It's banter. It's banter back and forth at like a lunch table.
Yeah.
And it's a casual conversation.
Yeah.
Whereas it can have so much more weight and baggage for us as adults. And so to watch kids have conversations, no, I believe this, but I believe this. This isn't like that part is really neat to see them actually learn to understand people around them.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I would say I've seen that in my kids. I'm seeing that in my kids. I know your kids are further along than mine, but I'm seeing that. And they do come home with a lot of questions or comments. And sometimes they tattle on their friends. And they'll be like, Mom, so-and-so said there's two gods. And I'm like, what do you want me to do about that? Okay. Anyway, but I just have to turn it into a conversation, right? And we talk a lot about like love and learning how to converse with.
I think when Maya got baptized, she invited her whole class out.
I love it.
And
did they come?
Two twins, two Hindu brothers, did show up with their dad, and they brought a bouquet, and they're like, we weren't sure what to do.
Oh, that's so
like, here you go.
I love that. That's so cute.
Yeah.
Well, and they do I would say like my kids have learned a bit of some boldness, and my oldest, she was asked to write some creative writing, and she wrote about her faith. And they asked her to read it at the school assembly. And it was like this mic drop moment of like, she ended it with, I'm not kidding, no one can tell you what to believe. And then she left. It's like silent. And I was like,
she's got a little bit of her mother's edge in there.
I was going to say more like Steve. Like she preached a sermon, let me tell you. But she was like, I'm not scared. Like she had a boldness that I was like, for you, this is where we need to be right now. I don't know, again, year by year. Certainly back to the Christian school, I admire that there are, how do I word this? So there are one thing that we're struggling, well, not struggling with, but I've got my eye on like intensely right now with my kiddos is their friendships. And it's not that, you're exclusively Christian friends when you're at Christian school, but you got to admit that there's probably more to pick from than at public school, because we don't have like any. And so I really admire that there is an element of a collected community of like kids her age learning the things she's learning, at home, at church. And I would love that for my kiddos. And is this falling under the misconception of what like Christian schools like?
I'm not sure exactly what you're saying yet. Like, is it that like benefit of Christian friendships?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely a consideration, and I would consider it a positive.
Yeah.
There are pros and cons to thinking about like, I want them to have close friends who are Christians.
Yes.
And then also I want them to know and love people who aren't Christians.
Absolutely.
We want our kids to do both.
Yeah.
So I think where, if your child is in a public school environment where there aren't a lot of kids there, man, you better hope that like they're making friends at church, or like you're being intentional about giving them opportunities to do that.
Yep.
Investing.
And our kids who are in Christian school, we are putting them in baseball, not in a Christian baseball league. Those are around.
Yeah.
But we're trying to get them to be rubbing shoulders at other times with kids who don't believe what they believe. But I would say we want to tilt the scales if we can, that they're being exposed to having relationships, caring for and about other kids who aren't Christians, but we want them to develop their closest friendships with people who will spur them on in the faith.
Right.
That said, there are kids who go to Christian school who, we're like, maybe don't hang out with that kid so much, right? And they're in their place and they're walking with Jesus, right?
Yeah.
But someone can sit at a desk at a Christian school and maybe not satisfy that requirement that you think your kid should have.
That's right.
And that's a similar issue that you might deal with at a public school, but you are helping yourself in some ways. Yeah.
I like that. It's wild. You know what I'm learning today is just the underlying pieces and factors are extremely similar in every choice, which I didn't know. So I'm learning. So you guys are doing a great job teaching me. And Kirk, right, Kirk?
Sure.
Okay, we better start wrapping it up. This time I would love to hear from each of you, if we can. What you would love to leave your listeners, a last thought that you'd love to leave your listeners with, keeping in mind that, maybe they don't have kids yet, but they're, this is on their mind, planning. Maybe they're in a season of, I'm not sure we're still where we need to be. I think we may need to make a change. So I'd love to give each of you an opportunity to talk to your listener, what you'd love for them to take away, the last thing that you'd love for them to take away from our conversation. And it can be anything. Be encouraging mostly though. And you can jump in on this too, Kirk.
Thanks, Plara.
You're welcome. Anybody can start.
I think one of the words of advice that I've given to people, if you're going to engage in the public school system, to come in wanting to reflect the fruits of the Spirit, which is not fear and anger and hostility, right? If we're coming in to reflect Jesus' love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. And as we do that, as we engage with the system, I would say one of the first places that as parents we should get involved is join the school council. You get to sit down once a month with the principal and or vice principal. You get to meet some other parents. You get to help support the school and show that you have goodwill towards what's going on there. And then if the thing comes up along the way somewhere where you've got to challenge something and you've got to ask some hard questions, you're not just a nattering, fearful, complaining parent that they don't understand. You're already starting to build a bridge and make that connection and be that force. But also, again, to be very aware of the fact that you do need to have regular sit down, have supper every night with your kids and hear from them and hear what they're reading and hear what they're learning and the questions that they're having at the lunch table, because those are the opportunities where that discipleship needs to happen and where we're bringing the word of God and the light of truth to reflect on some of the things that they're experiencing. And if we don't learn to open up those conversations, they're going to try to make sense of it on their own.
Right.
And we want to be part of that discipleship and that building the filter for their good. And with each of my kids, we also said, hey, listen, we do hold this loosely if this isn't the right environment. And there were a couple of times where we had teachers that we didn't agree with. And so we had some really real conversations about what does it look like as a Christian to submit to an authority when they're not calling us to sin or cross a line. And those were some of the toughest conversations, but those were some of the most building conversations for our kids as well. But again, it's always pointing it back to Jesus and God's teaching and bringing that light and that discipleship to their hearts. So that's definitely something that.
That's so good. You gave that advice to me, Amanda. Do you want to know if I listened to it?
Did you listen to it?
I did. I'm on school council. So that's my advice. School council in public school is not as bad as it sounds. No, it's been great. I'd love to jump over to you, Laura.
I think I would encourage parents to talk to a variety of different people who you love and admire. It's easy to just find people who say what you want to hear when it comes to any decision. We've said this a bunch of times, but be open-handed and seek the Lord. We need Christ followers in all of these areas. And I think surrounding probably homeschooling and Christian schooling, but don't make the decision based on fear. I think that's a real temptation to just be like, it's so scary out there. We need to just God doesn't call us to do that. He calls us to be light wherever we are and not to live in fear. So I think that's probably one of my biggest ones.
The flip side to the public education fear part is the fear of not having enough money, the sacrifice that's going to cost your family. Yeah. And one thing that I would say again and again, if you feel like God is calling you into something, God has a way of providing in ways that we don't imagine. And so if that is it, whether you're helping clean the school or volunteer or you're just making sacrifices in other ways, God, we have seen in lean seasons in our own life, God stretch the very little that we had to cover what we needed when on paper it wasn't enough.
Right.
And so again, being faithful, even with public education, the fear part a lot of times comes in through the money and thinking they can't make the sacrifice of time, the sacrifice of tuition in order to make that happen. And I don't want that to be a decision factor for people.
Yeah. And don't ask yourself, am I doing this out of fear and answer quickly? Think about it.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's great. I love that. Jeff, jump on in there.
Final thoughts. I think, as I had mentioned before, what's less important than the particular avenue you choose is your posture as a parent as you go into it. And so I think intentional parenting, having some idea of your discipleship plan and figuring out how your educational pathway is integrated in that is probably more important than the pathway itself. In selecting the pathway, I would say that not all public schools are the same. Not all Christian schools are the same, and not all homeschool experiences are the same. So you need to evaluate the options that are realistically available to you. There might be a fantastic Christian school that you've heard of that's nowhere near you, right? It might be that the public school in your neighborhood has really strong administration and teachers who are open to partnering with you in your kids' education in a real meaningful way. So I would say that you need to evaluate those options that are realistically available to you. Not all Christian schools are the same. Not all public schools are the same. And then, there was one more thing that I was going to say. And I think it's come up, but an openness and a willingness to change at meaningful junctures or when and if you feel called to. So our plan at present, which we are of course holding in an open hand, is to do Christian school up until about grade 8, because that's where the school ends, and then to transition our kids to public high school to try and harness some of the benefits of both. And I think and to try and acknowledge the way in which education at a young age really resembles a lot of parenting. And then at an older age represents a lot more skill building and transfer of knowledge and wisdom to some extent. So we're really thinking about in those primary grades, this person is taking on a share of the parenting load here in our decision making. Not to say that they become the parent, but you know what I mean. A lot of those primary grades are character building stuff. So that was in mind for us as well, but made us really think about probably changing what we're doing at some point. So yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you have something to say.
No, I know that this is a really heavy subject for a lot of parents, and they feel the weight, and understandably why they feel the weight of this kind of a decision. And I would just say, as a pastor, I would say to you, you got to please remember God loves your kids more than you do. And also please remember that God has graciously said, if you need wisdom, just ask him. And he's going to give it to you generously. So you have the best counselor support network available to you because you have access to the one who knows everything. And go to him. And you don't need to just feel the weight of, am I messing up my kids by whatever decision I make? And am I going to do this wrong? Just ask God. And as he leads you, as he gives you wisdom on what the right decision is, trust that he's led you and follow him and watch how he cares for your kids and watch how he shapes your kids in that process. That would be my best advice to parents.
I love that. Steve and I sometimes say, we're going to screw up our kids. It's just a matter of how badly, because we're broken people, right? And we're not going to get it perfectly. But with the Lord's help, hopefully he will give us the wisdom that we ask for, as you said, Kirk. So thank you. Thank you for joining the Homefront podcast today. Thanks, guys, for coming. You are all amazing. We have more episodes coming up, so make sure you stay tuned for those. You're not going to want to miss them. Have a really great day.